Be considered good advice from Edmund given what's happened with the seats. But I agree with you, remarkable at the end. These are my beliefs. I still believe them, even though we've had a terrible night.
The image is live from Downing Street. Prime Minister David Cameron, who knows he's now in power for the next 5 years, as he stands down, of course, in the meantime, before the end of the term, because he's already told us he doesn't want a third term. Mr. Cameron, who was the 12th Prime Minister to take office during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II.
You can always imagine Boris Johnson in the boot of the car, can't you?
I think it's probably a fair guess that Boris Johnson's probably watching these pictures as we are, David, at the moment.
I think he is.
So out into Whitehall and then up along to Trafalgar Square, and the short journey of 5 minutes or so to the Palace for an audience that we expect to last about 20 minutes. It's been said many times that technically, because the Prime Minister's simply staying in power, he's not a new Prime Minister, that the audience isn't strictly necessary, but as a matter of formality, matter of protocol, of course, they want to mark this election victory with a visit to the Palace and the start of a new term.
And as a Prime Minister who is very conscious of his visual image, his team is very conscious of the television images around him, something they've worked on extremely carefully in this campaign, the high-vis jacket probably being the most commonly worn outfit of this the 2015 campaign. He would not have wanted to lose out on these images.
No.
Masterfully sweeping through the centre of London with all traffic cleared before him. This is a proper sense of occasion.
And that's right, Catherine, isn't it? Because it is properly symbolic.
It is.
And this is to do with a proper conclusion to the election.
Yeah, and under her father's reign, we saw after the caretaker government, wartime government ended, Winston Churchill went to see the king and said to him, you know, this government is ending, this wartime government is ending. I may be back in 4 hours. And then went off, had lunch, came back to the palace and resumed his duties, as it were.
4-hour lunch.
A 4-hour. Well, it was Winston Churchill, so it's entirely possible.
Just as we see the images now, so the Prime Minister's car making its way along the Mall, gone through Admiralty Arch and down towards along the great processional route along to the Palace itself, and we'll see the great sweep of the Mall. I'm just wondering, Catherine, at this point as well, in terms of the civil service and this new administration in effect now, how much of the work is already happening? How much of the talking is already taking place?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how much continuity and how much change, because they're newly single, effectively, as a government, and how much do they want to sort of reform, renew themselves? I mean, if you go back to the manifesto, there's a lot in there that's continuity about the cuts to public spending, about the changes to the civil service, but they won't be a coalition anymore. So they may want to govern in a different style. And also Cameron has a mandate, so how does he want to govern? So it'll be interesting to see, as we expect later on today, the formation of his government and the ministerial appointments that he makes.
Not long to go, because there we are. The car is just passing St. James's Park on the left-hand side, ready to past the Queen Victoria Memorial. And James Landell is with us too, our Deputy Political Editor. And James, your thoughts at this point as the Prime Minister prepares for this audience? He's just arriving at the Palace now.
My thoughts are just how straightforward it is, about how much you and I have discussed in recent days, just how complicated this entire process of forming a government may be, how delayed it may be, how there may be a question of the Prime Minister going to the Queen not fully knowing whether or not he's going to get his Queen's speech through the House of Commons in the weeks to come. And yet here we have David Cameron as a leader of a single-party government now, unconstrained by coalition, going to the Queen with not an iota of doubt that he can command the confidence of the House of Commons, knowing that he will have a short audience, come back, make a statement to the cameras here in Downing Street. Then he will start the process, we understand, of making his new appointments to his new cabinet. And then it'll be very straightforward. On Monday, he will start the business of making sure that his manifesto is prepared and for legislation. I spoke to one of his key ministers a short while ago, and I said, what's the priority? And he said, it's very simple, read page 1 of the manifesto, and away we go. Now, there are obviously lots of questions about the scale of his majority, the behaviour of Conservative backbenchers, the role of those SNP MPs, particularly over the Scottish legislation. I imagine that is something that may come up in the conversation that the Prime Minister is about to have with the Queen. So lots of questions, but the overriding thought is this is a very traditional day following a general election.